Hello everyone, welcome to today's story. A peaceful dinner, a warm reunion, and a mother's smile. Everything seemed perfect. But what if, hidden behind that smile, lies a secret strong enough to change everything? What truth did Alex's mother reveal that left Tuna in shock? Will Tuna and Alex have the courage to face it together? Or will their fragile bond fall apart under the weight of silence? Stay with us until the very end to uncover the secret that could decide the future of their love. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Help us reach 10,000 followers so we can bring you more stories filled with love, drama, and life's hidden lessons. The morning light spread gently over the melon garden, where silence was broken only by the rustle of leaves and the weight of ripening fruit bending the branches. Alex walked slowly, speaking to a farmer nearby, his words carrying the cadence of someone used to both labor and leadership. The garden, filled with large, unripe melons, seemed like a metaphor for his life. Abundant, yet still waiting for its true season. Later, the hum of machines in the wood workshop replaced the softness of the garden. The air was heavy with the scent of bamboo and eucalyptus. Alex moved among his workers, his voice calm but firm, guiding them with the confidence of a man who had returned to his homeland not just to live, but to build. He explained the machinery, new and old, the shipments waiting to be delivered, and the constant push of production. The workshop, with its vastness and echoing noise, reflected both his ambition and the weight he carried. Every detail, the stacked bamboo, the glint of steel machines, the rhythmic chopping of wood, was part of a larger dream he was shaping. Yet, in the midst of this productivity, his eyes sometimes drifted, as though seeking something gentler, something beyond trade and industry. In those pauses, when silence almost fell between sentences, one could sense the deeper conflict within. The pursuit of success against the longing for quiet belonging. The garden and the workshop, two worlds intertwined, revealed Alex's dual nature. One foot in the restless drive for progress, the other yearning for roots, for a tenderness that work alone could not give. The clamor of the workshop faded into memory as Alex sat at a quiet corner of a coffee shop, where steam curled softly above porcelain cups. Across from him sat an old friend, their voices low yet weighted with possibility. Outside, the streets carried the rhythm of daily life. But here, the conversation was about futures yet unwritten. They spoke of fruits and vegetables, of custard apples and grapefruits that carried the fragrance of the soil. His friend described the potential markets abroad, where the hunger for clean produce was more than a trend. It was a promise. Alex listened, his gaze distant, as though already watching ships carry crates of fruit across seas. Each word spoken about brands, standards, and exports was more than business. It was a bridge between his hard work at home and the vast unknown waiting beyond borders. Yet beneath the calm discussion, a quiet fire burned. Alex confessed how deeply he longed to bring the name of his homeland to places far away, to make the sweetness of its fruits known in foreign lands. His friend nodded, offering the possibility of partnership, of shared effort, of risk and reward divided between them. The coffee grew cold as time slipped unnoticed. The weight of their words lingered like the bitter trace on the tongue, rich, complex, but uncertain. For Alex, this was more than trade. It was destiny calling. And still, in the quiet between sentences, his heart seemed to hesitate, caught between the noise of ambition and the whisper of a gentler life that awaited elsewhere. Evening descended softly, painting the farm in strokes of amber and fading blue. Alex returned home, where the world felt slower, quieter. He laid his coat aside and bent down to the cradle where the baby slept, the child's breathing a fragile rhythm that seemed to calm the restlessness in his chest. For a moment, he forgot the weight of shipments, machines, and contracts. Here, the only sound was innocence. He moved through familiar motions, feeding the animals, washing his hands, preparing the house for the night. Each act was ordinary, yet it carried a strange tenderness, as though he was weaving threads of stability into the fabric of his days. In the silence between chores, his thoughts wandered toward Lytuna, her presence at the farm, her quiet strength in raising the baby, her laughter that sometimes cut through his fatigue like sunlight through dust. Before long, he reached for his phone, dialing his mother. His voice softened as he told her he would bring Lytuna and the baby home for dinner. His mother's voice, warm and steady, promised to prepare the meal. As he ended the call, a faint smile touched his lips. This wasn't just about sharing food. It was about stitching lives together. Still, in the quiet after the call, his heart trembled. Could simple dinners and gentle conversations balance the storms of ambition? Could the soil of family and love steady a man who dreamed of distant seas? He stood in the twilight, torn between the fire of progress and the fragile peace of belonging. The farm lay in stillness when Alex arrived, the fading sun gilding the rows of trees with a mellow light. He found Lytuna seated quietly, cradling the baby in her arms. Her movements were slow, deliberate, the way only someone accustomed to balancing exhaustion and love could manage. When she lifted her eyes to see him, surprise flickered first, then softened into a tired smile. "I finished work early today," Alex said gently, his gaze lingering on the child's sleeping face. "And I missed you." The words fell softly, almost like a confession, and for a moment, silence held more weight than sound. Lytuna adjusted the baby's blanket, her hands trembling slightly as though protecting not just the child, but her fragile peace. He told her he wished to take her and the baby to his home, to see his mother, to sit at one table. The request hung between them, both ordinary and monumental. Lytuna hesitated, glancing at the baby, then back at Alex. Her voice was calm, but a flicker of uncertainty rippled beneath. "Is it convenient?" Alex nodded, the firmness in his tone hiding the quiet plea in his eyes. She rose, gathering clothes and small belongings, then placed the baby gently into his arms. He held the child awkwardly at first, then with growing steadiness, as if learning not just the weight of a life, but the gravity of responsibility. In that moment, between the hush of evening, the innocence of the child, and the unspoken questions in Lytuna's gaze, something shifted. The path ahead felt tender, yet uncertain, like a bridge woven from both hope and hesitation. The house smelled of simmering broth and freshly cooked rice when Alex opened the door. His mother stood waiting, her apron dusted with flour, her eyes brightening as soon as she saw Lytuna step inside with the baby. The old wooden house, often quiet, suddenly seemed to breathe again, alive with voices, laughter, and the rustle of movement. "Come in, my dear," she said warmly, taking the baby into her arms, as though she had been waiting years for this moment. Her words flowed with affection, her hands gentle as they traced the child's small features. Tuna lowered her gaze shyly, yet there was a softness in her expression, as if part of her longed to belong here. Dinner was set on the table. Steaming dishes of vegetables, meat, and bowls of custard apple brought in from the garden. They sat together, sharing food, each bite accompanied by stories of farm life, of markets, of ordinary days turned precious by companionship. Alex watched quietly, his heart caught between pride and humility, seeing the woman he loved welcomed so easily into his mother's care. Laughter mingled with the clinking of chopsticks. The baby, asleep nearby, seemed to bless the meal with peace. For a fleeting hour, the world outside, business deals, machines, unripe melons, faded, replaced by the quiet music of family. Yet beneath the warmth, there lingered a fragile thread of tension, unspoken but present. Alex's mother, though smiling, carried something in her eyes, a weight not yet revealed, a secret pressing at the edge of her silence. The meal was both a union and a threshold, a prelude to truths that could not remain hidden forever. When the last bowl was set aside and the laughter had begun to fade, the house settled into a hushed stillness. The baby slept peacefully in the next room, the air filled only with the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall. It was then that Alex's mother folded her hands on the table, her gaze drifting from her son to Tuna and back again. Her voice trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of something long hidden. "There is something you must know," she began, her words slow, as though each one carried years of silence. Alex looked up, his brow furrowed, sensing the shift. Tuna froze, her fingers tightening around the edge of her sleeve. The warmth of the evening cracked, replaced by an invisible chill. The secret, once spoken, struck like a sudden wind in a still garden. Tuna's face drained of color, her breath caught, as if the ground beneath her had tilted. Her eyes searched Alex's, desperate for an anchor, for reassurance. He said nothing. His silence was both shield and blade, deepening the distance between them even as his heart ached to reach for her. The room seemed smaller, the shadows heavier. What had moments before felt like belonging now trembled on the edge of collapse. Alex's mother bowed her head, sorrow etched into her expression, as though confessing a truth too long carried. In the silence that followed, choice hovered like a storm. Tuna's heart pounded with fear of what this secret meant for her, for the baby, for the fragile bond she and Alex were weaving. And Alex, caught between loyalty and love, felt the weight of destiny pressing against the fragile walls of hope. The night had deepened, shadows stretching long across the quiet house. Outside, cicadas hummed beneath the velvet sky, their song filling the silence that hung between Alex and Tuna. The secret his mother had spoken still lingered in the air, heavy and unyielding, like a stone cast into water that refused to sink. Tuna sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze lowered yet unsteady. Her mind replayed the words again and again, each repetition striking deeper, unraveling the fragile sense of belonging she had felt only hours ago. The baby stirred faintly in the other room, a reminder of innocence untouched by the storms of adults. she closed her eyes, torn between running from the truth or facing it with courage. Alex stood near the window, his figure etched by moonlight. His silence was no longer neutral. It was a battlefield within him. Past and present clashed in his chest. Ambition against tenderness, duty against desire, freedom against the gravity of home. He glanced at Lytuna, her face pale in the dim light, and for a heartbeat the unspoken passed between them. His eyes carried the question he could not speak. Will you still walk with me, even after this? His mother lingered in the doorway, her presence both bridge and barrier, watching as the weight of her confession carved uncertainty into the future. No one moved, for movement would mean choosing. The night closed around them like a veil, leaving their decision unresolved. Sometimes the heaviest storms are not those outside, but the ones born in silence, in waiting, in the fragile pause before a word is spoken.
Một bí mật khi nói ra giống như cơn gió mạnh làm rung chuyển cả cánh đồng đang trổ hoa, nhưng cũng chính nhờ cơn gió con người mới biết đâu là rễ sâu, đâu là ngọn lá để lay. Câu chuyện của Amidst và Lytuna dừng lại trong những khoảnh khắc bỡ ngỡ, nơi sự im lặng bao trùm và vang vọng hơn ngàn lời giải thích. Tình yêu không chỉ nắm tay nhau trong những ngày nắng mà còn là đứng bên cạnh nhau trong những tăm tối giăng kín. Bí mật có thể làm người ta sợ hãi, nhưng lựa chọn sau cùng định nghĩa tình cảm. Ta chạy trốn quá khứ hay can đảm bước tiếp phía về tương lai. Và đôi khi câu trả lời không nằm ở những lời hứa ồn ào, mà ẩn trong những khoảnh khắc bình yên, nơi hai ánh mắt gặp nhau và chọn ở lại.